Alright folks, welcome back. Well, we got us some goodies mailed to us. If you remember from the last video, we are troubleshooting the HVAC system. We'll get a little bit more shots of this after the fact, but anyways, was able to get Ford, shop manuals from 1979. There's, like I said, there's 5 volumes in there. I've skimmed around through that. It's pretty dang good. That came from these guys. Basically a pretty cool site. The other thing that I got a hold of was this is an actual book from 1979. This would have been given out if you were to do like a training class to work on Ford products. That's what this would have been. And that came from also got a an owner's manual, because I didn't have one in this car. That came from these guys here. They've got tons and tons of different choices. I might even someday order like sales brochures and parts books just to have a bunch of cool stuff. And then we got us one of those. This book right here shows everything from diagnostic testing with electrical systems, and then other pages in here you've got vacuum. It's a good thing to get a hold of. I'm sure there's probably other ones around, I don't know. There's more of the vacuum system in this thing. But you pretty much need to, get something such as this, or, things like this, if you're gonna, work on something that you really don't have. I've got a lot of mechanical background. I can understand a lot of electrical systems and all that kind of stuff. I just don't know specific to this car. And so later on we'll go through this a little bit and what it does and how it works. I don't need this in this car. Everything appears to be functioning just fine with this. I found it at what I thought was a pretty decent price, so I got it. And I can't use this one in this car. I guess I could, but I don't want to. I could use all the parts and stuff from it, because mine doesn't have this. This would have been a switch for the rear defrost, if I recall correctly. So and this car doesn't have that, so this is left blank. See, everything's the same except for that. It just doesn't have that switch in there. In keeping the car original, that's how I'd want to leave it. Anyways, like that, we'll go through this afterwards, because the problem with this car is you said in the other video, we don't have no control over the temperature. It's this thing stays as hot as it can be all the time, but it does change between all of these. Everything else functions and works like it's supposed to, and we narrowed it down in the last video, part of it anyways, to this valve right here. Okay, so as we saw in the first video, that valve lives right here under the dash, and it's super easy to remove this dash. And so I also got rid of that plug, and I just plugged in these lines just like this, and there's totally not going to be a issue with that at all, especially since the plug that used to be on here was just this right here, and it had a broken tab, and it just didn't fit very tight. And so that's all I did, was just eliminate it. Pretty much all I can do. And so what we're going to do, troubleshoot this thing for right now, is, you know, we already know that with the cable on here, you know, this works, moves back and forth. That's the first thing you need to check. And go ahead and remove it. And remove the valve, take these lines off. Alright, so what I went ahead and did is let the lines fall down, come down here on the floor where it's easier to work at. The smaller line, as you can see, runs right into this group here. This is your supply. This has vacuum when the engine's running. And then this big one, as you can see, goes straight to that. And that's your actuator for the blend door. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and hook the supply line on the nipple where it was supposed to go, smaller one. And then instead of this one, since we know it ain't working, we just want to see, are we getting any vacuum coming out of this, you know, valve. So we're going to hook this vacuum gauge up to it, and then we're going to start the car, and we're going to just move this around, and you should see some vacuum go from, you know, 0 to however much it's going to, with the vacuum gauge hooked up to just the supply line of getting like right up in here, like 16 inches or so, which is pretty good, and that's more than adequate enough to move that big gold actuator that's underneath the dash there for the blend door. Okay, so we got the car running, got vacuum on there, that on there. I don't hear nothing hissing out of this. Move this, and it's a piss poor shot of the gauge, sorry. Don't get no movement with the vacuum. So let's grab that new one and try it. Okay, so we got the new one. We're gonna hook the supply line up to the small nipple like we did before. Then we're gonna hook the vacuum gauge up to here. And then we're gonna move, trying to get this all in a good shot, sorry, without the glare. Whoa, look at that. All the way up to full vacuum. That's what we got when we had the supply line off of there. All the way down to nothing. This should be all the way hot, and with this position should be all the way cold. Which is exactly the position that it works. Okay, so now we got this hooked up. Running a little fast. Hard to hear, but okay, so we got this hooked up to that. And so I'm gonna actuate this thing with my hand just like it is. And look at that. Holding that blend door closed. Okay, this is... Okay, so we got air coming out of here. Cold air. Now that deal's moving back the opposite direction. Totally closed. Got really good hot air. So now we're going to move this. Now that thing's pulling back, closing that blend door. From when we did that other video, we got to actually see that blend door work when we had the heater core out of, which lives right behind this steel here. Now we got ambient air, you know, as cold as it's going to get because the AC is not on. Okay, so in a little bit we'll get this, what I'm calling this valve, you know, put back in here. Let's talk about this a little bit, and I don't know everything about this thing, but I'll relay to you what I do know about it. It is a temperature sensor, and it is purely mechanical. There's no electronics that run to it. There's just vacuum supply into here and an input from your cable as to what you want, and the vacuum is, this is your, you know, this is the controlled vacuum after it goes through here, running down to your actuator, so that if you got this thing in the position of say 75 degrees, this thing is supposed to sense somewhere around 75 degrees, and it's going to move, it's going to control the vacuum out of this port to that actuator under the dash to keep the temperature in the cabin at 70 degrees. This part right here, it goes and it matches up with that hole right there, which in turn, you know, allows it to go through here. The other thing that goes on here is you got this tube and that runs into right there, and when you got your fan on, this is just blowing air in whatever temperature's in that box. It's just blowing right from the fan, and it blows it through here and across, and I assume, and it just exhausts out of here. I assume that's just, you know, as a cooling of whatever's going on in here. I really don't know that part of it, but I do know that in the service manual and that old training manual that I have, there's a calibration procedure set up on here, so that, and we'll go through that. This is a little bit different of a mount, so we're gonna have to take this off from right here, and then we're gonna have to put our mount right from right here on there, and then we're gonna have to find some kind of a seal to go in between here. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to use because this one doesn't have anything, so it's a little bit different style, but it should work just fine. Other than that, this is all exactly the same. This tab right here is part of the calibration. We'll go over that, and yeah, then we're going to get it put back together. We're just going to go with the vacuum line straight hooked onto it like we were, and we're not going to, you know, obviously have this, because this doesn't want to stay on there anyways, and you know, it's just how it's going to be. So let's get this valve put on here. I don't think there's anything else, you know. Obviously here's the cable, we'll get that put on, and then we'll go through that calibration procedure. Okay, so actually I was able to trade, this is the new valve. All I did was I pulled this off. It just was kind of stuck on, snapped on like that. You know, this used to be here. Must have been a, you know, either a different car or a different, maybe a different year or something. I don't know. It just had, you know, all I knew is when I looked at it online, it everything looked the same here and stuff like that. This just had these little tabs you kind of push down back inside there to get this piece off of here. This is the one that was in there before, so I think I'm just going to go with just sticking this back on. You know, it just goes right back like so, put the bolts, you know, put the little screws in there, and I think it'll be just fine. Okay, so we got this all back in place. This just slides over that. Leave this loose for right now. This is, you know, you can either do one of two things. You can remember exactly where it was at when you took it apart, which I don't, but then when I found out the calibration procedure, that's part of it. So obviously this just you know, this just snaps in place here like that, nothing on the other side. And we will go through the, you know, how they want you to calibrate it. And here's just another shot of everything from outside here. So this is what we got. So obviously we've got your controller, and comes up here with the cable hooked on there. Step number 1, so you want to look and see which direction to rotate the sensor calibration locking pin. So in our case, it looks as if from this direction, looking at it exactly the way it is right now, it would be a clockwise position. Okay, so step number 2 is, while moving the temperature control lever, rotate the calibration locking pin into the calibration notch of the sensor arm. Kind of let me show you on this first. So this is how we got this in position. So right now it's kind of looking like that, you know, this is in about this position. And so they're saying, you know, we're talking about moving it clockwise. We're talking about turning this and pushing this at the same time and get that pin. See, now you can't really move it. If I really force it, it's just going to do that. But see how that lobe kind of locks into that little space right there. With that fully, you know, flat like that, that's your calibration position. That's what they're talking about doing. So with the camera still going, I'm going to go ahead and do it from inside there. All right, so we are there. Now what it says to do, third position, is check the position of the temperature control level should be at 75. If it is not, loosen the cable housing to the sensor attaching screw. That's that screw right there. And move the temperature control lever to 75 while the control arm is in the locked calibrating position. So while this is locked, move your, let's go in the car and do this. All right, so as our position, we're not at 75. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and move this over here to 75 and see how that's moving and not that. That's what they're talking about. So we'll move this over here to 75. Close enough. It's not going to be, not rocket science we're doing here, guys. This is primitive technology, and close is all you're going to get. So now with that position like that, go ahead and you know, tighten this down. Okay. Now what we're going to do is, since we're starting the procedure, you know, we started the procedure with this loose, you you know, we're still at 75 right now. We can't move this until we undo this. Well, I guess you probably could, but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to do it. You know, I want to turn this, you know, by hand. Probably move this like this. There we go. And get it out of the way. Move this back and forth. You know, make sure it still works as is intended. I'd probably move it over here to one side or the other. And then we'll go ahead and set this locking pin, you know, this deal again, just to double check it. Alright, so got that locked again. I can show it. Locked again there. And we're back at 75. Somewhat. Like, see, yeah, see, you got a margin of error that this is going to move back and forth. But like I said, this is not, you know, this is the, you know, earliest version of automatic temperature control that I've ever seen and worked on. So anyways, got that all back. So now we need to get the vacuum lines run back up here. And like I said before, I'm just going to hook the vacuum lines on here straight. There's nothing wrong with doing that at all. They fit on here really tight. This deal, you know, that used to be on here, this is, I don't know, in my opinion, just a little bit of over engineering when you can just totally easily do that. So now we got this all tightened up, and you know, these tightened up, and that clamp, you know, or snapped in place there, you know, and this is working with that, doing what it's supposed to do. So and I'm sorry about the light glare outside, so we're gonna go ahead and do first thing. And as I said in the previous, well, let me talk about that later. All right, so we got hot air coming out of here. And now we got cold air. Here we got somewhat warm. Not really changing yet, but it's probably not supposed to until it temperature senses, you know, however this deal works. Like I said, it's purely mechanical. So I know that when you put it on completely hot, there it goes. So, you know, and it's not what's the word I'm looking for, instantaneous. Now it's starting to get hot, you know, because it's, they said this is the earliest version of automatic temperature control that there could be out there. I don't know, but we can now change this back and forth. So we got hot air coming out of the vents. Now we'll turn back here, turn the AC on. We got cold air. All right, and getting colder and colder. So, yeah, that's how this particular system here works. It senses the temperature in the cabin. Actually, let's turn this off where we can hear. Okay, so I lowered my door down just a little bit. Holy crap, these are the smudges from my head. I would be looking in here to see what was going on. Jesus, what an idiot. Alright, so what's going on here? You move this lever over here and you put this to 75. Now let's say it's 65 degrees in this cabin. So you just change this to 75. Now this is going to sense, the air, and somehow or another this is mechanically calibrated to change, and it will move this big gold actuator, and it's going to coat to a little, it's going to move the blend door. It's going to get a little bit more heat coming in and sensing it kind of through this area. And then once the temperature inside of the cabin in here reaches 75, I would assume that it's probably going to close the blend door a little bit or move it in back to the colder direction. If the temperature starts dropping, it's probably going to move it back up. I mean, that's essentially how this is supposed to work. You're supposed to be able to put this at 75 degrees and it should stay. Whereas let's say this cable was just hooked straight to the blend door, you move it into this position right here, it's going to be whatever temperature it's going to be, and if it's comfortable for you, great. If not, then you're going to have to move it one way or another. So, my opinion may be a little over-engineered, but that's the way it is, and we had to get it fixed back the way it was. Now, I said in the previous video that when you put this thing over to the heat position, that the fan would just shut off. Nothing. Move it to any other position and everything seemed to be fine. That problem has gone away, and I don't know, I didn't do anything to fix it. Like I said, the only thing I had was this thing unmounted a little bit. I had it pushed back down inside of here, so that I could look at it, because I was, at that time I just wasn't sure. I wasn't even sure what this was connected to at the time. And come a long way from, how that video started, to where I said I can move this and I can hear something back in here moving, to what we know now. And now it's fixed. So it's about all the information on that I can really decipher and everything. I mean, that's about all I can really figure out. I would really like to know more about how this does what it's supposed to do, but I don't. And the service manual doesn't really go into that kind of stuff. I mean, a service manual isn't going to go into, how does a starter actually crank the engine, but it will give you troubleshooting steps as to figure out, do you have a bad starter? And that's essentially what it's doing with this, is it gives you the steps of, you're able to, what we did when we checked for vacuum in the supply line and what we checked for vacuum, coming out of it. And with this thing in the full cold position, which is this position, so this is full cold right there, you will have your supply, full supply. So we had 16 inches in this line, and we had 16 inches coming out of this. And then when this is in the full warm position, we've got nothing coming out of here. Obviously you're still going to have your supply, that doesn't change. Nothing coming out of here, which at rest, this blend door is in the fully open, full hot position at rest, which makes sense. If none of this stuff works, at least you want heat for the defrost to work. That's the idea behind everything, is the default position of all your vacuum controls. As far as this changing the direction of which ducts you want, the default position is coming out of the defroster if nothing were working. So at least you have heat, and at least you have it in the defroster, because that's about the only thing that you really actually would need, So that's how that system part works. We'll go talk about a little bit on that control over there. Okay, so I ordered this because I thought it was pretty decent price, and you never know. at the time when I thought, you know, that maybe putting in this thing over in the heat position, that maybe there was something wrong with this. I did read somewhere that automatic climate control system could have something to do with that too, but other than that, but like I said, there's not anything linked to the switching of the fan on to this control, and so I had to have a hard time. I did read it somewhere in a forum somewhere. Got to be careful with those though, because you got to sort through information that's not right, information that's mediocre, and once in a while stuff that's superior to the rest. So anyways, since we have this and we look at it, you know, obviously this is your temperature control that you would hook your cable up to here, and then obviously your main switch right here for your fan speed, 4 positions. And then I guess we'll go ahead and we'll flip this over. And as I mentioned before, my car, this car here doesn't have this. This is just a blank spot, but this would be for a rear defrost. So you would just, it's a momentary switch, just push it up, a little LED comes on right here, and your rear defroster comes on. So in here, this is this moving back and forth to different positions. Well, what's it doing? Well, for one thing, you've got electrical switches. It's doing certain different things as far as, you know, well, we're turning the fan on. But the other main thing that this does is, obviously these are all vacuum lines right here. So at some point or another, one of these, most likely, you know, that one there, I couldn't really tell you for sure, but this is going to plug into a plug, you know, with vacuum lines running out different directions in the car. One of them is going to be a supply, and it's going to supply this particular valve with vacuum, and depending on the position that you select here, so for heat, you know, it's going to, you know, change in here, and that supply vacuum is now going to be able to go through one of these lines somewhere to supply that particular actuator to that position to put it down to the heat, you know. And then obviously basically what you're doing here is this is coming out your air conditioning vents without turning on your AC compressor. This is turning on your AC compressor, coming out your ducts. High and low is AC with coming out at your feet and out of the air conditioning ducts. Obviously heat is going to be no AC. I'm pretty sure there's no AC on just the heat position. That's just going to come out the floor. This will turn on your AC compressor because it's now halfway between the floor and the defrost. And then this position is obviously your full defrost, and that will turn on the AC compressor. So, you know, like I said, that's what this particular valve is doing, and it's you know, and so it is kind of nice that these are color coded a little bit. They do talk about, you know, in the manual and stuff like that, as far as, you know, if you're getting a hissing noise or something, you know, it's like squeeze the purple one as a hissing stop. You know, I mean, that's why you need to get a manual. It really helps to try to figure out where all this stuff goes, because there are a lot of vacuum lines in this car. And, you know, there's the vacuum stuff that, I mean, there's stuff that runs on vacuum in this car that you would think, why in the hell they do that? And then there's other things that don't. You know, the door locks are electrically, you know, operated, but you would think they would be vacuum because they got everything else. The brakes are run off the hydraulic power steering pump. They're not vacuum operated. But then you've got a temperature sensor up here near where the thermostat is, and instead of having electrical wires coming out of the sensor, it's got vacuum lines. It's weird. It's totally weird how this thing is. But yeah, I just thought I'd go through this a little bit. We might, you know, go into a little bit more in depth of other things that are vacuum operated on one of these, because there's a lot. You know, headlight lids are operated by vacuum. So I'll just do a little rundown over this. This is troubleshooting, you know, the HVAC system. Like I said, I don't need this right now. If you know, if someone's really looking for one of these and they can't find one, I'd probably sell it. But it's possible that someday in the future I could, you know, or it's just going to go with the car. So if I end up keeping the car, I'm pretty sure I am. It's needs to be cleaned up right now, but it's one of the nicest shaped ones I've seen in a long time. So anyways, that's that troubleshooting of the automatic temperature control. And you know, if anybody has any questions, I can try to do my best in answering. I've gotten you know, a lot more videos out, and so sometimes it's a little bit harder for me to get to that kind of stuff. But something as specific, you know, with something like this, it's just not, you know, I searched around for a lot of information on trying to figure out how this system works and didn't come up with much, hence the reason we're making this video. So anyways, that's everything I got for that particular system. So thanks for watching.